Welcome to part 3 of the Hotwire CNC foam cutter build. If you've missed the other two parts, which is part 2 was the electronics and part 1 was the introduction, there'll be a link in the description. So I suggest you watch them if you've missed them, because it does make more sense. So in this video we'll go on to build the actual mechanical side. So that'll be the vertical tower and horizontal tower. Installing the draw slides, the stepper motors and the threaded rods and get them connected up and working. So we'll move on to the horizontal base now, and as you can see from the animation, this is what we're going to be doing. So hopefully you've got all the parts cut out to their dimensions, and then we can start to mark and drill the holes that we need. So we start with part B, and this is the base for the stepper motor. So I've just cut them out along the line here, and as you can see from the plans, all the centre holes are marked. So it's just a matter of sticking the plan down and then just going along and marking it. And I use a small pin to start with, just to see through, and then afterwards I'll get a centre punch and just go and this is one of them automatic centre punches. It wasn't working that well actually. I had to give it some hammer. So there we are, all drilled out on them holes. And the next thing we need to do is mark part A, the centre, and line part B up. And this is where we use the cross dowel jig. So you can just see the drawing I put up then. So there is a drawing for that in the plans. So all I'm doing here is lining the part B up with part A on the centre, and then I've got the cross dowel jig, and I'm just marking where the holes are. I don't use the drill to drill the big 10mm hole out, because it tends to pull the MDF apart. So what I do is you go on my pillar drill and do that once I've got the marks. So it does mean you're taking the thing apart quite a bit, but once you get used to the technique, it's fairly quick. And these are the barrel nuts that go in, and you see they line up fairly well. The beauty of this is it doesn't pull the MDF apart. So what we're going to do now is cut out the support piece as part C. I'm just taking a few pictures for the eBook. As you'll notice, the part C, I haven't cut the diagonal on yet. It's easier to leave them square until we've got it all marked out and drilled. So I've just marked the centre lines on part B and then line the centre of part C up. So all this is in the eBook as well. So what I do now is just clamp part C up, make sure it's in the centre, and then just mark the hole and then back into the jig. This build would be a lot longer without the jig. You know, I advise you to have a go at making one. It saves you can buy cross dowel jigs, but they're I think that's a ridiculous amount of money. So there is a drawing in the plans for the cross dowel jig, and I just use some inserts to stop the drill wearing away the hole. So see, now we've got the first part C on, second one's on, and I'm just marking where the hole's going to be coming from underneath. So again, across onto the pillar drill to drill through the big 10mm holes. No, these are the 6mm, sorry, not the 10mm. And so then we go back on, put the part C on, make sure it's nice and square and everything's looking good there. Then clamp it down, and we just mark through with a 6mm drill. and then back onto the jig again. So my jig, I used some 18mm high density MDF, and that seemed to work quite well. But anything can be used really, as long as you follow the dimensions in the plan. Just clean up some of the dust here. I do suffer a bit with the dust from MDF. It's not that good for you. So now we've got the holes marked out, we can put the diagonal in. So just nip across onto the bandsaw and knock them off, and then we can put them in. So this first bit, there's a lot of marking out and taking on and off, but once you get the hang of it, it goes fairly quickly. So I'm just checking to make sure it's all nice and square. And then put the other one in. And just double checking it's square again. And then we put the stepper motor in. So the stepper motor's got the flexible couplers on it. So I just tighten them down first of all. And now we're ready to attach the draw slides, which is the important part of the build to make sure everything runs smoothly. So in this part here, we'll be fitting the draw slides to part A. As you can see, we've got the first part of it completed. So we've got the stepper mounted, the support pieces, and it's all bolt up nice and solid, and everything's square. So you can see it is square there. So that means our rod's going to come out nice and straight. But what we need to do now is get these draw slides on. And the important thing is with these draw slides is to get them running parallel to each other. And what we'll do is we'll actually fit part G, which the vertical tower sits on, and we'll make sure that slides freely, because what we don't want is any binding on these draw slides. So if it's narrow, so if it's narrow at that end, I mean that's exaggerated, but as it comes up, it's just going to bind and cause the stepper motor lots of problems. So once we've got the first draw slide positioned and screwed down, then what we do then is we position the second one, but we secure one end, and then what we do is we put a screw through this part here. So that we can see if I can show you that there. So that there becomes like a slot when you look from the inside. So when you look from the inside there, you can see it looks like a slot just in there. And that allows us to adjust it. And initially what we do is we adjust it, and we get the gap between the two exactly the same using the digital calipers, and then screw that one down. So what we'll do is we'll get part G on, and then we'll test that it moves really smoothly, because if it moves nice and smooth, then we're going to get some good cuts out of our machine, so it's not going to bind anywhere. Right, so the first thing we need to do is actually take the top part of the slide out. On these slides you'll see there's a lever there that you can push, and as you push that lever it slides out. And we'll do the same for the other one as well. Right, these draw slides are set 25mm from this edge, so we'll secure the first one. So we butt it up so it's just on the triangular support piece, and then we set it to 25mm. So I think I already set this to 25. Yeah, that's set to 25. And then what we'll do is we'll use a couple of clamps just to hold it in position. So that's on there. That's now set at 25mm. And what I use on these you can get these tiny little screws here. I'll show you. And these are specially for drawer slides, and they go into the holes on the drawer slides. Because we've only got 12mm here, we can't be putting any long screws in, so they're going to poke through the other side. So what we'll do is we just mark this one. Right, so that one's on. Put the drawer slide back in. We'll give these slides a good clean out before we use it. Finally screw it down. Right, so. Right, so that one's in there. Now we'll use this elongated hole here. Right, so now both slides are secure. What we need to do then is attach part G. And then when G is attached, then we can test. So we use the template for part G, put that on, and drill the holes out. And once we've drilled the holes out, then we'll place it on top of the slides and then mark through and drill the slides out for these small screws. So these screws will stick up like this. I've done one already, so I'll show you. So we'll end up with the screws or bolts coming through from there, and they sit right inside there, so they're not going to foul on anything. And then a part G, and here's one I've cut out already, will then sit on there and we can screw it down. So I'll show you how that piece is done. So once we've got that drilled out, we'll end up with this piece, and then all we need to do then is line that up. Yeah, so on the other one I just used some spacers just to keep it off there, because some of the holes were lining up exactly with here, which I didn't actually want. And then what's quite useful here is a piece of masking tape on the slide. It's easy to see the holes. Are you watching? Was it interesting? Nah. No, down you get. So I've drilled the holes on part G, and one of the things we have to do is make a recess for the cross dowel to go in, because when it goes in it does come across the drawer slide, and if it's stuck out, it will not sit squarely on the drawer slides. So to cut the recess out, I've used one of these, I think they're called Forstner forcing the bits. I've got a set of these and they won't come in all different sizes. And it's what I've actually used to drill the holes for where the stepper motors come through. So they make a nice clean hole. So that size there is a 15mm for these cross dowels. So what we need to do now then, make sure the drawer slides are pushed as far up as they go. And I just use these spacers. They're actually part K for the later on in the build. And I've also marked on top, so this tower, the front edge where the stepper motor is going to be facing that way. So we just put it on there and it should more or less line up flush with the drawer slides. And then what I do then with a 5mm drill, just go through and mark through on the masking tape, and it shows up quite well. The actual screws I'm using are 4mm, but the drill size is 5mm, so it allows for a little bit of leeway on there. So if we have a look, yeah, we've got some good marks here. I'll just highlight them with the pencil. Right, so what we need to do now is take the drawer slides out, and now we've marked them now, we need to make sure they go back in the same slides. So I'll mark this number, get a felt tip. Yeah, so we'll just mark it now. So I'll mark this number 1, and this number 1, number 2, and this number 2. Right, so what we'll do is we'll take these slides out. And then we'll drill through. So I'll drill them out and we'll come back. Right, so I've drilled them out now. And what we need to do now is put the screws through. I tend to leave the masking tape on until I get the screws in, because when I was doing one previously I ended up putting one in the wrong hole. So once I put it in the right hole, pull it out. Just put one of the nuts on loosely for now. Same on the front one there. And the nuts on loosely. And what I do on these, because these will be sat on here and we need to make a little recess in these so it sits flush. And what I do with these, just a little bit of blue Loctite to stop these nuts coming undone, because when the machine's up and running, this is the base for the vertical tower and we don't really want these coming loose. So just a little bit of on that one. A little bit on that one. Now just tighten these up now. So these are 4mm screws and nuts in here. So all the parts are in the cutting list and parts list. Right, so that one's number 1, so that's this one. So that should slide in. And I've already done the other one to save a bit of time. So we'll slide that in. Hopefully now, this should, there we are. All right. So the only problem is it's sitting proud at the moment. So what we'll do is we'll just a small recess, and what I use for this is this big 10mm drill. You just go down a few millimeters on here. So I'll go and do that. So that should sit nice and flush now. Yep. Then we'll put the screws on. We'll put the nuts on, tighten it up, and then see how the slides move. Right, let's see what it's like. So the other thing you can do as well is check the gap. I think it's a little bit tighter at the bottom. So what we'll do is we'll just loosen that screw off a little bit. Yeah, that feels to be moving quite nicely now. It does feel a bit heavy there because it's pulling on the other slides, but it doesn't feel like it's binding. It feels nice and smooth. So as I said, it's important to make sure this doesn't bind, because we don't want to be overloading this stepper motor, because these are, with it being NEMA 17 stepper motors, they won't have as much power as the NEMA 23s on my old machine. You need to do that on both bases, and we use the same method on the vertical where the two slides, so there's two slides on the vertical, so they'll be sat up there, something like that. So we use the same method to ensure they're running very smoothly as well. Right, so we'll get on to building the vertical tower now. So here's what we're going to be doing to get the vertical tower built, and just to remind the guys, all the instructions are in the ebook. So if you download the ebook, there's a full set of instructions there which will help you along with the video. So all we're doing here is doing very similar to the horizontal part. We're just marking some holes for the vertical support pieces, drilling the holes out, and once we've got them holes drilled, then we'll get the draw slides on. So the top hole in here is slightly bigger to allow for adjustment on the top support. So we're just basically fitting the draw slides the same as we did. So I'm just making sure they're flush with the bottom edge, clamping them down, and then just screwing them onto the board. So this should be fairly straightforward now. So we're just marking the holes in part I, which is the piece that connects the two draw slides together. And we do that in the same way, basically as we did for the part G earlier on the horizontal slide. So just drilling them holes out. And I'm using these little nut inserts. So they've got a 6mm thread in there for the driver piece for the threaded rod. So as you can see, it's very similar process as before, just marking through with the holes. And then we're just putting the 5mm screws in with a bit of Loctite on to stop them coming loose. And then we're just going to drill the recess in so it sits flush on the slides like we did before. And then we just check to make sure it's working okay. There's a slight bit of adjustment, and yeah, that's looking pretty good now. So I just put the extra screw in and getting rid of any bits of MDF dust in there. And we're putting some Loctite on now these other screws just to make sure they don't come loose. So what I'm doing now is actually taking the slides off, and I've marked them first because it makes the rest of the build a lot easier. So all I'm doing is marking the centre of the board on parts D and G so we can line them up exactly on the midpoint. And once we've got them lined up there, we can mark through for where the holes are for part G. Unfortunately, I missed a little bit of video here, so the next bit will cut to actually being fitted. But it's fairly straightforward to do. So now we're marking part H, and we've drilled the holes in part H already. So again, this bit hasn't been cut yet on the diagonal. It's easier to clamp it in while it's square. So it's a little bit fiddly just to get everything lined up and making sure you haven't got the clamps in the way of the holes like I did there. So make sure you use the template for part H to mark the position of the holes. The big holes and the two little ones there, because the dimensions are in fractions of a millimetre, and it's to do with the height of the draw slides. So I think one of them is something like 38.22 or something, which would be very difficult to mark out. So now we're going on to the stepper motor support. So this has got elongated holes to allow for adjustment. And there's a couple of ways to do this. You can just drill the holes, 2 or 3 holes in there, and then I just clamped it to the bench and then filed them so they were elongated. And so this is how it turned out. And that gives this adjustment on the threaded rod. So all I'm doing here is putting some support pieces on here to make it a bit easier to mount part H, sorry, mount part E on the tower. So I'm just checking everything's square, and then I'm just marking some holes, and then we're back on with the jig again to get the holes. And I was just checking them with a torch there just to make sure it was lined up. So there's one of the things you notice with this build, there's a lot of drilling. So you can see with the adjustment we've got there. So a bit later on, when we check the adjustment of the threaded rod, we'll have some movement there. So just make sure the cross dowels slide nice and easy on there. And now we go on to part F, and that's the support for the stepper motor there. So with the stepper motor on the other end, it does add a little bit of weight, so we don't want it to bend. So I'm just checking everything square here, and then marking it out, drilling the holes. And again, I'll leave it square until I've got the holes marked, and then knock the edge off. You could leave them square if you want to. I just think it looks a little bit nicer with them at an angle. So more drilling. And then on we go with part F. So we're just checking it for square there, and that looks fine. So what we do now is we go back on with the draw slides and just check that's all running okay. And then we can put the stepper motor in. So this is our little NEMA 17. And now we've got that on, we can mount the 2 towers together. One thing to check is to make sure that once it's on and the weight is on the horizontal base, make sure it still moves nice and smoothly. I think I did find I did need to make a slight bit of adjustment on one of the towers. This one was okay. And now we go on to part J, which is the drive block for the threaded rod. So the T-nut goes in there. and then we mount up the threaded rod into the flexible coupler. And now these screws go into them nut inserts. And now what we're doing is we're checking the distance of the threaded rod so that it's the same top and bottom. So if it isn't, we've got adjustment on the top there. You can just see me altering it a little bit. And then we need to check it from side to side as well. And the part J has got a little bit of movement in it as well. So you can just see me altering it there and just checking the movement. So once we've done it, what we need to do is make sure, like I'm doing here, is just make sure it moves very freely. And all we're doing now is we're basically doing the same process on the horizontal tower. And these are part K, which has got the T-nut in. So we'll put the T-nut on. And one side, only one side has the T-nut, the other piece is just a packing piece. And the holes they go into are elongated as well, so you can adjust the threaded rod in the vertical tower, so you can see it just moving a little bit there. So here I'm just checking the alignment. So checking it from side to side and then top to bottom as well. And you should be able to move these very easily by hand. And you can see now I've just put the drill on it there to just check it. So that's one done. We just need to make another. So that's mechanical side finish. Wasn't too bad, was it? So in part 4, what we'll do is we'll go on to building the wiring for the motors, connect the motors up, make sure they're all working okay. Then we'll check the calibration to make sure it's moving the distance it should move. And then we'll run some test cuts on there. And we'll actually use the Arduino to heat the hot wire as well, which seems to work quite well. So thanks for watching, guys. If you've made it this far, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.